So today's topic is Intro to Community Development Financial Institution, Northern Initiatives, and Green Lending. Our speaker today is Chris Spalding, who received a BES from the University of Michigan in Natural Resources and Environment and an MBA from GVSU. She started her career in the nonprofit sector, focusing on environmental advocacy, consumer rights, and government reform. She worked at Herman Miller for 12 years in dealer development, product management, and the design for the environment team. In 2010, she and her husband Jason opened Brewery Vivant and later Broadleaf Brewery and Spirits, both certified B corporations and the first LEED certified commercial microbrewery in the world. In January of 2025, she began working at community lender Northern Initiatives as the climate director with the mission to build a green lending strategy. So from that autobiography, you realize that she has been involved with a green world for quite a while. So Chris, if you are ready to speak, thank you.
For sure. Thank you so much. Also, I would be remiss to not mention that I was on the advisory board for the Sustainable Brewing Program and know Steve very well because of that. So I'm going to admit up front, this is the first time I've done a presentation about the work that we're doing. So, you know, we'll just see how it goes. And I appreciate any questions people have. You know, for sure we can have questions at the end, but if something catches your eye as I'm going through this information, feel free to just ask. I will not see the chat, so I guess just chime in. So the intent I have is to really give people more of an introduction to what CDFIs are. I think we're a part of the lending environment that a lot of people are unaware about. And then Northern Initiatives specifically. And then I have a part that I think you probably all already know. So I will go through what we're solving for quickly. And also the opportunity will probably be pretty familiar to many of you. And then back on what are we specifically doing at Northern Initiatives related to this green lending. So first on CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institution, it's a mouthful, so it's nice that we have a nice acronym. We're regulated by the Treasury Department, so we're different than a commercial bank. It's called the CDFI Fund, and it is something, as you're talking about advocating with your elected officials, the CDFI Fund is something that our current administration doesn't believe is necessary. So you're welcome to advocate on our behalf as well. About a third of our funding comes from the federal government, and then our funding comes from other places too, and I can talk more about that later. But all that to say, the head of the Treasury Department is very supportive of the work that we do. So we're hoping that that helps us out. But we are mission-based community lenders. What that means is we provide access to dollars and services to underserved and low-income communities. 60% of all of our lending has to go to those populations. So that is part of our certification, is making sure that we are lending to the communities that a commercial bank usually says no to. We come in many forms. Credit unions, a lot of credit unions are CDFIs. We're a small business loan fund, so we're an example. Then there's, micro lenders. There are a few venture capital providers. And then many of us are nonprofits, Northern Initiatives being one of them. And then just to give you kind of a scope of what CDFIs look like within the state, there's 55 of us. 47 are headquartered here, so 8 are more nationally focused or regionally focused. And then throughout the country, there's about 1,500 certified CDFIs. If you look at the stats, the latest stats that we have good information for is 2022. So within Michigan, we deployed, more than $1 billion. We've been growing pretty quickly. As you can see, if you look at the numbers between 05 and 22, it was 5.6 billion, right? And of that 1.3 was just in that last year. So our work is to deploy money, right? And get focus on small businesses. There's residential, there's multifamily housing. Those are the kinds of things that usually a CDFI is lending towards. Through the lending, we create a lot of jobs with our customers, right? And develop real estate, support lots of businesses, et cetera. And then, as part of our certification, we are also having to track who our borrowers are. So you can see the loan fund borrowers. So that's the type of CDFI that we are. Over, 58% were BIPOC owned businesses, 50% women, 55 low income, and 34% startups. I think startups is an interesting part of what we do. Of a commercial lender, generally will say no to a startup because they don't have a track record. And we're able to say yes for a number of reasons that I'll get into.
Okay, so you said we can ask questions, right?
Please, yeah.
With Trump's DEI mandate to get rid of DEI, how is that affecting you?
That is why I mentioned the administration is not supportive of the CDFI fund. I think they view it as a DEI initiative.
Have
So
they cut your funds yet?
they've tried a couple times. So he did an executive order on March 14, where he basically said the government needs to eliminate everything within the CDFI fund that isn't required by statute, which everything is required by statute. So he didn't get very far with that, but he just did another executive order trying to chip away at our industry. I think last week that one came out. So from more of that umbrella perspective, he has his eye on us. And then a lot of the grants that we receive. So we get our money either through grants from the government or foundations, or we borrow money from banks, right? And reloan it at different rates. But a lot of the grants that we apply for are also, things that their administration is looking at. We just had one, there's a minority business development grant that funding was just cut a couple weeks ago. So we had an article in the news about that. But I mean, they're going after a lot of things that we do. So
Okay.
yeah, challenging time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so a little bit more about Northern Initiative specifically. We're about 30 years old. Our headquarters is Marquette. I live in Grand Rapids. There's about a third of us that live kind of in this area, but we're really throughout the state. As if you think of, a lender, you want your lenders to be where their borrowers are. So we have lenders and coaches that live throughout the state. Most of our lending is everywhere. We don't do a ton in the Metro Detroit area, but we, have a few things there. But the main thing that I think is important to point out is this statement that we make loans banks couldn't, shouldn't, or wouldn't, which I think is, part of the mission-based nature of our lending. So a bank will say no because you don't have a credit history, because your credit history isn't great. They may have something against your industry. It's not something they want to invest in. So what will often happen is a bank will suggest to a borrower who they say no to, like, oh, you should check out this CDFI that they know. Because our whole point is to take on these higher risk loans. The main thing that we can do that because of is that we provide actual services as well. So we lend the money, but we provide technical assistance. So those things can be, like we have a lender, and every customer also has a coach. So the coach is more like a business coach. They help the customer understand QuickBooks. They help them understand how to better market. They help them stay on top of state regulations and federal regulations that are coming, that as a small business owner, it's really hard to know all of those things. So it's, I think, awesome that what our industry does is it pairs those two things together and really walks hand in hand with our borrowers, which leads to a lot more success rate. I think our like loan default rate is less than 3%, which is pretty remarkable considering that we do higher risk loans. We mentioned in here this Initiate product, which is a software program that our team developed. So a coach will meet with our borrowers one-on-one, but then they also have this software platform that they can go and get all sorts of information about how to better run their company. So this kind of goes over that, I suppose. So the one-on-one training plus the Initiate portal, and then we'll do webinars, and really we're just there to support making sure our customers succeed. Okay, any other questions about CDFIs?
Anne
Before I
has a
move on.
question.
Yeah,
Do you work with cooperatives, like food cooperatives?
yeah, a lot of our customers tend to be, well, not like we have co-ops that are definitely customers of ours, yes. I've in talks with the Marquette Co-op about helping them with a loan for some refrigeration changes they have to make. So if you look at like Northern Initiative specifically, most of who we lend to today is a small business. That said, we can also lend to nonprofits, institutions, whatever. It's just been where our expertise has lied. And then other CDFIs around the state, you know, they may focus on something different. Okay, so this is the part I think you all know. We're solving for, you know, an energy system built on extraction. And when I say what are we solving for, I mean specific to the green lending. You know, you'll like that. The clean energy and energy efficiency are not partisan issues. They should be accessible to all. I think Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist does a nice job making that point anytime I see him speak. And, you know, there's some polling that I think is pretty fascinating. This was alluded to at the My Healthy Climate conference. I think Hillary Doe maybe mentioned these, but 72% of Americans think global warming is happening. Yet at the bottom one, 64% that say they rarely or never discuss it with their friends and family, even though it's an issue that's important to them. So, you know, there's just a lack of understanding and education out there that I think we need to all help overcome. And I think that's part of what you all are doing. A couple other facts. I imagine people have seen this, but this shows, you know, just how many climate-related disasters have happened over time. It's scary statistics to see. Within the state, I've been trying to get a real handle for what are the issues happening specific to Michigan, and, you know, where does it make sense for us to try to get more involved with green lending. So aging utility infrastructure, this is probably not news to anybody, but, you know, we have a pretty unreliable grid. I think if you look at why is that, and as I've been researching, I think part of what makes Michigan amazing is we have all these great trees, but part of what makes our grid unreliable is that we have all these great trees. So if you look at where are the problems, it's the northern lower peninsula, eastern upper peninsula tend to have the most outages because they're rural areas. There's a lot of trees. And when things like that ice storm happen, you know, there's a real impact on the grid. So the challenge of above ground lines and beautiful trees is pretty special for us to figure out. This is just, you know, data that's out there, but I think it's interesting to see, you know, where are the most unreliable areas. If you look at the best reliability comes in these municipalities, and that's mostly because those are more urban areas, right? They have a smaller footprint, and they don't have as many of the natural issues as those rural areas. Another piece of and this is what compelled me to seek this job when I started looking, is just the disproportionate impact on the underserved populations, who is, you know, the mission of a CDFI is to serve those underserved populations. So the impact of dirty energy on the low income communities is larger for all of the reasons stated here, right? They're closer to the issues, that pollution leads to bigger problems within rural areas or within urban areas. The lower income populations tend to have less access to trees and green space. And then this last bullet, taken out of my Healthy Climate Plan, that the lower income spend 18% or more of their income on energy. I think at the conference, they were saying as much as 30% is spent on their energy. So, you know, that's a problem. And we're hoping as we can lend towards projects that create community solar or solutions like that, we can help be part of that solution. Okay, so switching into what is the opportunity. These are fun. I love stats, so pardon my barrage of information here, but surveys have been done looking at, you know, who do people think which region is the least exposed to climate change, and you can see 47%. The biggest chunk is the Midwest, so we have an opportunity, you know, in our region to be this climate haven. I think you're hearing more and more about that. Interestingly, 71% of businesses want partners to help them navigate climate change and what that means for them within their business. I look at the work that we do as our CDFI, where, okay, we can loan you the money to support implementing some of these changes, but our coaching side also means that, you know, we will help you become more efficient through other means or connecting you to other resources. So I think we can be a real partner to small businesses. And small businesses, you know, create a lot of jobs, right? And that's important to our state. You probably have seen this, the clean energy jobs pay more than national median wage jobs. So anything we can do to promote all of these activities happening within our state not only helps clean up our environment, but also does support, you know, bringing good paying jobs into the state. So the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, part of the Inflation Reduction Act. I think you all know this because I think community change grants are somewhere within the IRA. But there's 3 buckets of dollars, the Solar for All, which the state has access to still, and they just announced that they're taking applications for their pilot round of deploying those Solar for All dollars. There's the NCIF and the CCIA. As a CDFI, we're focused on the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. We've actually applied for money through the Green Bank for Rural America before the dollars were frozen. So hopefully we'll see that come around at some point. And then as soon as that happens, Opportunity Finance Network was one of the other awardees, and that is the umbrella organization for CDFIs. So we expect to apply for those dollars as well. CCIA projects, all of those different projects have stipulations attached from the EPA. Some of them I think they're still figuring out, which is part of what's interesting, you know, in the state of the GGRF dollars being frozen. These organizations were working directly with the EPA to really define all of the criteria, from what I can tell. And now, you know, they can't have a conversation. So even when they're unfrozen, I think there's still a decent amount of work to be done to make sure that the awardees are meeting the expectations. But the things that we hope to use those dollars to lend towards are anything related to building decarbonization. So that's the structure of the building as well as equipment within it, EVs, EV infrastructure like charging units, and then renewables and battery storage. So those types of projects are what you can spend those GGRF dollars on, with the stipulations for us as a lender that we have to offer these loans at better than market rates, better terms. So they become very compelling to really support these underserved low-income populations who have kind of been left out in a lot of ways from this clean energy economy. We have to invest those dollars in underserved communities. So there's various maps that exist that say if you are a GGRF recipient, your loans have to be within these zip codes pretty much. And then there's a lot of reporting requirements, both for the borrower and for us as the lender. And then, of course, you know, whatever work they're doing has to meet sustainability, you know, efficiency criteria. Kind of tying it together, if you look at the CDFI industry as being mission-based and really put in place to serve the underserved populations, that is a big reason why you see us highlighted within the GGRF dollars, because we already have the relationship with the communities that they're looking to deploy those dollars into, and the competence to work with them and you know, really try to get the money out of the government, out of the banks that they're in now and into the hands of the people that need to see these projects happen the most. And then, you know, just appreciating the fact that we live in this state of Michigan that has the My Healthy Climate Plan. I love hearing the Lieutenant Governor talk about that too, because he's on a number of occasions mentioned, you know, it's an amazing plan that is in place, but they look at it as the floor, not the ceiling, right? So just the beginning of creating this clean energy economy. And at that conference, I just thought this was a good point that the University of Michigan climate provost, Shalonda Baker, said, you know, there's no clean energy transition without equity. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here. And I'm kind of nearing on the end here, but just to put some perspective around this, when the federal government changed the auto standards, you saw so much impact on a positive way about related to public health. So, you know, as we look at how do we deploy these dollars and what's the role of EVs and those that infrastructure to support it, I think we can really make a big impact. So we're hoping to see, you know, that happen. If you look at the health impacts over time, as the federal standards have gotten tighter and cleaner, you can see like what a huge impact has been made already, right? And if we can keep on this path of EVs, you know, you can really see the benefits to our health in doing that. So more reason to do the good work. Okay. The last couple slides are just related to specifically at Northern Initiatives. What are we doing? We're asking lots of questions. So I started in January. This is a completely new path for us as an organization. So all I've been doing is asking questions and talking to different people and really trying to understand, you know, who has the needs, what are the needs, what needs aren't being met, what are the barriers, so many questions. And so many amazing conversations. So when we look at who do we think will be the recipients of these loans that we intend to make, our existing customer base, of course, because, you know, they represent all of the things that these loans are intended for. Michigan Saves is a partner that we will have in this journey as well, right? As our state's green bank, they are already doing a lot of amazing work around green lending. So we'll be partnering with them as one of the lenders that they will have on the commercial side. But I assume we'll also partner with anyone who's doing the work. My assumption is, you know, there'll be a certain amount of need from from the end borrower that will come to us. But really what we're looking to build relationships with are, you know, institutions, communities who are wanting to see more of this activity within their community, but also the contractors, installers, equipment distributors, who are working already with customers, but the customer having to say no because they can't get a loan from a bank and they can't finance it on their own. So we're trying to make sure that, all of these different entities know that we're available to help make these projects happen. And looking at some industry specific things. So speaking of the, food co-ops, we're trying to figure out how do we help all those food co-ops in Michigan go from the refrigeration systems that they have today that really don't meet the standards, the regulations as we move into the future. How do we help them come up with a way that works for them financially to replace these outdated, greenhouse gas heavy refrigeration solutions, right? Things like that. So the specific loans that we're targeting are, related to the GGRF requirements, but also beyond that. So that building decarbonization, the EVs, as I mentioned, renewables, but also there's a lot of cool entrepreneurs in this state, right? We have so many people with great ideas coming out of our education systems, and as startups, a lot of them can't find funding. Sometimes they'll get investment through like venture capital, but we want to be here for them as startups, providing working capital so they can pursue these dreams they have for sustainable technologies. And then a problem that I've heard about with more frequency is an organization or a company gets a grant to do something like a REAP grant for solar, for example, which is amazing, but they don't get those dollars until everything is done and it goes through a process. So a lot of times they end up having to not do the project, even though they know at the end they would get the money because there's not the money in between to pay the bills. So we're looking at how can we provide these bridge loans to any of the entities, especially looking at solar, as I think a lot of grants are related to solar and renewables in that space. How can we help bridge that gap until they get to the point of receiving their grant dollars? Should, the grant dollars exist, which is its own thing. And then we're also looking at, as we do this program, we do want to put some reporting requirements on so we can track what is the benefit environmentally to us funding these different types of projects, right? So how can we collect the data from our borrowers that show by installing this more efficient HVAC system, their utility bills went down. So we're still trying to build that out. Our hope is to have these products available by the summer. And that would be our traditional kind of terms. But our real hope is that the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund makes it through the courts, those dollars are released, and we have those lower interest rate, requirements and dollars through the government. Should that not happen or take a long time, we're also, currently seeking grant dollars from foundations where the way those can work is, we have our dollars to lend, but we can apply grant dollars to buy the interest rate down and then be able to offer these types of loans and support these projects with a more compelling low interest rate again through the foundation grants, kind of offsetting that cost. Because as a nonprofit, right, we do need to make money to keep our own operation going. So we do not give grants to customers, right? We're just helping them with their projects and needing to create, some profitability for the organization. So that is what I had to share.
So if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand, either the yellow hand or your physical hand. Tim?
Thanks for the great presentation about something I was totally unaware of, which seems very valuable. You gave just one specific example of the business in Sault Ste. Marie. Is it possible you could mention 2 or 3 other specific organizations that you are providing loans to?
Yeah, I mean, we have loans throughout the state. I'm trying to think, being new, I don't have them in my head very well. I'm trying to think of who I've heard of that's in the Kalamazoo area, but we do actually have quite a few loans in the Battle Creek area. We do have a partnership with the Kellogg Foundation, and they have like a business startup program that we administer on their behalf. Where I think every maybe 3 months, a cohort of about a dozen startups, entrepreneurs goes through this program, and then we can fund the beginning of their work should they seek more resources from us. I really wish I could remember the names of some of the customers, but I just don't have that in my mind. But a lot of who we work with are retail, restaurants, breweries. We have some interesting, a trend right now where it seems like we have a lot of trucking companies. So like small mom and pop kind of trucking, and then like hair salons, things like that. But we also work with some different companies involved in like the circular economy. So different recyclers, composters. There's one in the GR area I visited called Wormies, where he's just trying to get food waste from residents and commercial accounts and turn it into fertilizer, because that's what we should be doing. So we have a few composters. So those are the types of things that we tend to lend towards. But then we also have, things that are completely different, and it's always fun listening when we approve new loans to what people are doing.
Steve, your hands up.
Yeah, thanks again so much, Chris, for your time. But I've got a couple questions that I wanted to ask before I left. One is, your position is relatively new, focusing on climate solutions. And so I was curious how that came about in your company. What was the motivation or the thought on the part of the company? And the other is more kind of nuts and bolts. Let's say this will never happen, but let's say I had a small company, and I was interested in getting a loan. Would I have to learn that you existed and reach out to you, or do you do outreach looking for companies and approach them and say, we can help you out here? Or would I have to work through an intermediary like a community foundation or something like that? How would that work?
Yeah, so the first answer is how did this position come to exist? That's really the organization's strategic plan was to get into sustainability in some way. And as the GGRF was created and our umbrella organization, Opportunity Finance Network, applied to be an awardee and was awarded the dollars, there was kind of like a call to action from our umbrella, saying like, we are the people that are needed in order to get these dollars deployed into the right communities. So there's a handful of CDFIs that have created a spot like mine. Most are more in a wait and see, given what's happening, as we were, just starting to apply for dollars. So, yeah. So, and part of my role too is not just within our own organization, but we have a Michigan CDFI coalition. What I hope to do is learn a bunch on behalf of all of us and then share that information out. So when those dollars are released and others start applying, they can learn from the landscape analysis basically that I'm doing. And working with, the state and others to make sure that happens. So there's the first answer. The second is like, people find us in all the ways you said. So our lenders try to be really visible in the community. They go to, the different events where you might find small businesses who are a good target customer for us. But we try to have relationships with the economic development groups, with the chambers, with the foundations. And then, you know, a lot of it is really because we're a industry that most people have not heard of. They don't know you can come to us for a loan. They'll go to a commercial bank, and that commercial banker, when they say no, usually they know of a CDFI they can send that person to. So our lenders also try to have a good relationship with a number of bankers in the area, right? So when they have a good case for a loan from us, they can just kind of move them along into our realm. So that's like our traditional path. And then, you know, the work that I'm doing is really trying to get in everyone's head, right? Who has a customer that needs these types of support for these types of projects, right? So I'm trying to find the right people at the utilities to let them know, like, hey, if somebody is one of your customers needs something and it doesn't quite fit what Michigan Saves does, let them know that we exist and can be a lending partner. But I'm also trying to meet with the solar installers and the HVAC contractors, and just really this time of like anyone who might need to know about us. I'm just planting seeds all over the place. Meeting with groups like yours, right? Like I think there's such little knowledge about our industry that we really need to be more loud about this work that we're doing.
Okay, Susan?
Yes, thank you so much, Chris. This is really important work. It's great to hear this is happening. I see a fair bit of the funding is from the federal government. Are there nonprofits like yours in all 50 states? And what other sources of funding do you have? And is it possible for ordinary people to invest, kind of like a Grameen Bank model or something like that?
Yeah, yes, all those things. So like for us, a third-ish is from the federal government. We do get a good, the state, thankfully, is also really supportive of our industry. So we've been able to get grant dollars or loaning dollars through the state. And then we do apply for grants through a lot of different foundations. So, I mean, the Kellogg being one, community foundations, our CEO is trying to build more partnerships directly with some of the community foundations throughout the state. I think she has a relationship with Kalamazoo's foundation. And a lot of times those will be like, we will give you these dollars to lend, but the end customer has to meet these criteria, right? So one of the things I think is most challenging about loaning out our money, as I'm talking to our lenders, we have a list of like 30 sources of dollars that we can loan out. And they all, for the most part, have stipulations attached. So if the lender is meeting with somebody in this county or city, you know, they might only be able to get to look at our buckets of money that come from like 6 places versus all 30, because they want to support geography, or they want to support only women-owned business, or only BIPOC-owned business, or, you know, only food-related business. So I think it's like, I can't believe our lenders keep it straight, because there's just so many different sources that the dollars come from, and then the terms attached to those dollars, and which ones have interest rate requirements, or, you know, whatever. All that to say, we are starting, as we're seeing what this next 4 years could look like, and it being a more challenging time for us. Our CEO is trying to build a program that is more human, one-on-one focused, where, you know, an individual could, and I think we do this already, but she's looking, you know, to get some more momentum there, right? Like out of my paycheck each time I get paid, you know, I have an allotment that goes just towards lending dollars, right? So how do we do that with community members? And I think we'll see what happens there. So yeah, all of those things. And then another important point that I don't think I made well yet is there's the community, I think it's the Community Reinvestment Act, So the commercial bankers, years ago, there was a recognition that they weren't supporting underserved populations at all. And that's just not going to work for the economy, right? Like you need to find sources of dollars to lend to people that the commercial banks aren't going to say yes to. So they have a requirement that a certain amount of their dollars need to support underserved populations. A lot of times what that looks like is a bank will say, hey, CDFI, I'm going to lend you these dollars for you to lend on my behalf, so I meet the Community Reinvestment Act requirement. So we do have a good part of our dollars that actually come from commercial banks who don't want to be the ones to lend it themselves, but they have a relationship with us and trust us to lend, those dollars, not necessarily on their behalf, but, through a funnel.
Thank you. That's all great to know. Two follow-ups. First, is there like a national organization of nonprofits like yours which might help with visibility and sharing across state lines and all? And second, I recently switched from my bank to a credit union, and it seems like credit unions generally are better about your mission, but I'm sure there's exceptions.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of credit unions who are CDFIs. So, and you'll see, I think it's probably not been on your radar, right? But I bet if you look on their website or marketing materials, you'll see if they're a certified CDFI. And then that Opportunity Finance Network is the umbrella organization that all of us that are certified kind of can choose to be members of. And we do. They do a nice job from what I can tell of bringing us together. They have like a website we can go to that's really just like, hey, I have this question. Who might be able to help me? Who's already done this? And they create those opportunities in the moment, but also they have regional meetups. So we just had one with Midwest CDFIs in Detroit a couple weeks ago, which was great to share space with people. They can give us some updates on all the things that are happening, learning opportunities. And then they have, annually they have all national meetups too. So it's a very well structured and supported industry. As I'm coming into it, it reminds me so much of the craft beer industry and how we're set up. I keep seeing these parallels from these two things that you would think are totally different, but we have so many things in common.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Rick,
You're
you had a
welcome.
question?
Yes, I recently got financing for my solar panels through Michigan Saves, and
Yeah.
heard through Michigan Saves kind of a similar presentation to yourselves, and it's all good. So, but I wanted to know the contract language before I went very far into the process, and they were very reluctant to give me a copy of the contract language. Same thing I went through when I got the solar panels itself. The company I went through didn't want to give me the contract language until I actually went all through to my credit and to get approved for a loan. And that when I do that, every time you actually apply for a loan, a credit, that can affect your credit score if you do it too many times and it's recorded. So the question is, do you hesitate to give the contract language in advance or let people know what the contract language is?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I wish I had an answer, and I will say I don't. I do know our terms, we try to be really upfront with this is the kind of terms you can expect from us, but beyond that, I don't have an answer. That's interesting to hear though. What information were you hoping to get specifically?
Just to see if there's any snags in it. You get a contract and you finally get to the place where you can have to sign it, whatever, and then they let you have
Yeah.
this big legal document, and you don't want to hire an attorney, but most of the time you
Right.
can understand the English language, and you can read through it and understand it. But without going through that and then taking the time to feel comfortable with it, I just thought that was a little bit of a hurdle to get over, and I wanted to make it easier for other people. So.
Yeah, totally. I noted that. I will ask our team about that, because I mean, I have heard from a few small businesses as I've been talking to them that, you know, one of the barriers to getting a loan from a CDFI is because we take on these higher risk loans. You know, we really do require a lot of information. So it's a lot of work just putting all of the stuff together in order to see if you can get the loan or not. And that can be a frustrating process. We're trying to take advantage of some of the AI that's out there and streamline some of our underwriting process right now to like figure out, you know, what do we absolutely need and where could we just pull data automatically without it having to be provided, every single piece of it from a customer. You know, I think AI has its pluses and minuses, and I'm sure you all have talked about data centers and the pluses and minuses about data centers, but I think, you know, if we can get a good use of that technology to streamline processes and make things go quicker and easier, that would be ideal. So yeah, that's a good point that I will take back to our team, though I can't provide you with any real answer today.
Thank you.
But I appreciate that
Transparency,
question.
I can understand that need for transparency. Tim?
I wonder if you can comment more about the challenges you have regarding your funding from the federal government. First of all, there are two organizations, one of which I mentioned earlier, Lawyers for Good Government, and also an organization called Democracy Forward, who are helping people with those kinds of challenges. And so why don't you answer that, and then I have another question.
Yeah, lawyers, the L4GG group has been very involved in our issues today as it relates to I think they're specifically focusing on the climate related grants and programs that are being hampered or frozen or whatever word we want to use. So they have been a good partner to the industry. And then, you know, we have lobbyists that we work with at both the federal level that represent all of the CDFIs. We also have lobbyists at the state level that we work with as a coalition, and then our own attorneys that we try not to use because it costs money, but they are very helpful as we navigate some of these things. So a lot of us are, you know, looking for those organizations like the L4GG that are kind of pro bono, right? Like doing this work on behalf of a lot of us. We're also in touch with the Attorney General's office here. She has so many lawsuits against the administration right now, but a couple of them pertain to some of the grant dollars that we were expecting and were removed. So there's been a lot of good support for the industry and for the kind of work that we want to be doing. It's just, you know, we just have to keep going. We're spending a lot more time, our senior leadership team is spending a lot more time in Lansing and in DC, meeting with our elected officials, trying to make sure they understand the importance of our industry. So yeah, it's quite a time. We've been doing as they work on appropriations at the federal level, you can send appropriations requests through a lot of the elected officials' offices. So we've been quick to send those out specifically for the CDFI fund to say, you know, we're not asking for more money. We want to exist still, and we're hoping you can at least match what you did last year, which was federally was $324 million, right? So we all I think, well, hopefully most of us, right, sent those appropriations requests in. So I mean, it's a lot of advocacy work that we haven't expected to do that is really distracting from doing the work that we want to be doing.
Mhm.
Survival, right?
Susan?
I've read that for microfinance loans in developing nations, the repayment rate is really high. Is your repayment rate typically also very high?
It is, yeah. I mean, that our default rate is, less than 3%, which is great. So that means, 97% are not in default. I think the current economy, could challenge those numbers, but on average, we land in a really safe place.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Fingers
Okay.
crossed.
Anne?
I'm just wondering, I just went to the co-op meeting a couple nights ago and learned that all of their refrigeration went down because it's outside and someone stole all the copper wire from it.
Oh, no.
And so they lost, well, they were able to give some of the food away to Loaves and Fishes, and they do have a insurance, so that's covered, but I'm sure it just replaces what they have with something similar and not something that's that's more climate friendly. How would the People's Food Co-op appeal or write to you? What is your address? How would they go about looking for finance for
Yeah, if they,
refrigeration?
so the bigger refrigeration program we're trying to work on, I think is going to take some time. But in the immediate time, we have on our website, northerninitiatives.org, there's an application, to seek a conversation with a lender. So that's
Okay.
the easiest way. It's just a quick intake form, and then one of our team members can follow up.
Okay, and then you do have people then who counsel with marketing and that sort of thing to help them
Yeah.
with their loan. Yeah.
It's pretty awesome. 'Cause I think so many small business owners get into it because they love this product or service and they have no idea how to run their business. So our team is really helpful with helping people navigate all the realities of business ownership and running.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at 1 o'clock. I have one final question and then we'll have to wrap it up. And farms, I did not see farms at all on who you lend to. But their money is also drying up. A number of them are trying to become greener through regenerative or different farming methods. Do you work with farms?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
it wasn't
we've,
on your list.
yeah, we started really focusing only on rural. So I think a lot of our borrowers have been farms in the past.
Okay.
And then that's another target group I have is the regenerative ag, and talking to people within that space. I met with, I'm totally blanking on her name, but she's at the Kalamazoo Biostation, and she works with a lot of the regenerative ag entrepreneurs. So she and I met, I don't know, maybe like a month ago, just to let her know, we're getting into this space and stay tuned. So I'd love to see us support more of that work. And I think whether it's GGRF dollars that could do it, or, our program outside of that, I think that's a need for sure. And one we want to continue to support.
So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Chris.
Bye-bye. Thank you.